And you are live.
Thank you, Bryce. So good evening, everybody. I'd like to welcome you to this Let's Talk budget session. We're going to be with you this evening up until about 7:30, all going well. So my name is Aidan Buckley. I'm the Manager of Communications and Engagement with the Sunshine Coast Regional District. I'd like to start by acknowledging that the Sunshine Coast Regional District is located within the traditional territories of the Sechelt and Squamish First Nations. So tonight's session will involve two short presentations, one from our Chief Financial Officer, Tina Perot, and another short one from myself. And it'll be followed by a question and answer session. So I'd ask that if you do have a question at all, to feel free to put it into the Q&A down the bottom of the screen, or else you can also raise your hand and I can promote you up so you can ask your question yourself. In addition, you can also add questions into the chat. And we have a couple that have come in through last week and through our Let's Talk platform this week as well that we'll be asking. This session is going to be live streamed on YouTube and will be available to watch shortly after the session finishes. So I'm going to start just by introducing everybody who's on the screen here in front of you. So I'm going to start with Area A Director, Leonard Lee. Area E Director, Donna McMahon, is here as well. We've got Area B Director, Laurie Pratt. And District Sechelt Director, Alton Toth. And Director Toth will be leaving us a little bit early today. He's in another meeting to get to just after 7 p.m. And then our Chief Financial Officer, Tina Perot, is here as well. And it's Tina who's going to be starting us today with the presentation. And just while Tina's getting set up, I'd just like to let everybody know that if you are looking for more information about this year's budget, we do have a page on our Let's Talk platform, our engagement platform at letstalk.scrd.ca/budget. So Tina, you can fire away when you're ready. Thank you.
Thank you, Aidan. I'm just going to share the presentation. Sec here. Oops. Screen or the bar is overtaking itself. All right. Thank you. So today is our second information session. Our first one was on Tuesday, November the 16th. We're going to be covering a lot of the same material. The only difference that's going to be included today is related to our rates for user rates for utilities, which were discussed at our last November 18th, which we'll touch on a little bit here. So some of the information we have provided at various meetings already, which have happened. First was at our November pre-budget sessions at November 1st. And sorry, I just have a delay a little bit in my presentation here. Sorry about that. So again, some of the information was provided at that session, and we talked a little bit about some of the key items impacting our budget for 2022. And in some of those staff reports, we did discuss inflation. And of course, anyone who has been watching the news and has been keeping track of some of the various supply chain issues, as well as what's just recently happened with our flood situation in the province. And so this will likely exacerbate some of the information that we provided earlier in the month. And so essentially what we're noticing is definitely some cost impacts. We're going to most notably see some things in fuel prices. And so at the end of October, we were seeing inflation nearing 4% for Vancouver. So again, that will most certainly impact some of the regional district services. Again, COVID-19 is impacting our community and the regional district in various ways, whether there are economic impact to our various business community, as well as various cost pressures, but also our workforce is being impacted by that, both positively and from a negative perspective. Is definitely from a positive, we're definitely seeing a lot of people from various other communities coming to the Sunshine Coast, but again, that's causing issues as far as workforce housing and other types of things in the area. So we're also seeing the full year impact of positions that were approved both in 2020 and 2021. And what that means is when new employees or new resources are approved at the regional district, we don't budget for them in the full year. And so in 2022, we're going to see the full impact of those. We also have various information technology. So also these are some of the impacts related to COVID as we work remotely and offer services remotely to our constituents. We are seeing a lot of pressures on our information technology, and there's a lot more to come. So we also saw the reinstatement of our community recreation capital renewal. So part of mitigating some of the taxation implications through COVID in 2020 and 2021, we reduced the investment in our capital funds for our facilities, and we're seeing the reinstatement of that in 2022. So again, that was also to mitigate some of the losses in revenues and our user fees from our community programs. So we also have several future commitments related to debt servicing, and most notably for a lot of our water infrastructure, and those are for the Church Road well and for our metering program for next year. So some of the emerging items that are still ongoing and will be discussed at our future budget deliberations, as well as various committees over the next month or so, is looking at other sources of revenue and for projects. So our Community Works gas tax funds are one of those areas. And in some of our pre-budget discussions, we're talking about using several hundreds of thousands of dollars of gas tax to offset taxation or user fees or parcel taxes for some of our services and for our utilities, in particular for the North and South region, which we'll touch on a little later. We also have several projects still being tendered in the marketplace. And so again, as we start to tender these larger projects, it will be quite interesting to see what happens with those. But we have been seeing a trend on various capital projects coming in a little over budget. And so again, that has impacts as far as how those projects will be funded and or modified going forward. We also have several grants that we continue to look for opportunities and look for applications in the workflow. So again, whether or not we can use some of those grant opportunities to offset some of the funding being proposed for budgets next year. And again, some of the emerging items is our landfill at Seashelt is nearing the end of its life. And so we have several financial obligations associated to that in the future. And so this is not our obligations related to what our next steps are for landfill on the coast or waste disposal. It's essentially just what our regulatory compliance is to close those landfills appropriately and to monitor them on an ongoing basis. And in our financial statements, it is significantly underfunded, almost $5 million of funding that is lacking for that. Again, just to put some caveats to that, our responsibilities associated with this can extend up to 100 years. And so we have to make sure that we have appropriate funding for that ongoing. So we'll be discussing that during budget and at future committee meetings. And our funding for future water supply expansion is definitely top of mind and a key strategic priority for the board. We also, as I just mentioned earlier, we just conducted our utility rate reviews and presented those at the November 18th Infrastructure Services Committee. And those are coming forward to the board this week for those minutes to be adopted, with bylaws being considered for December the 9th. We also have some possible amendments to various street lighting services. This is a very localized type of item, which was also presented at Infrastructure Services. So again, there may be some small financial implications, as well as our transit on annual operating agreement. And so we received that BC Transit's proposed budget for the upcoming year, and we then understand what those financial implications might be upcoming for us. And so again, that was presented at our November infrastructure meeting. And so for 2022 projects, when we presented our preliminary proposals on our November 1st committee meeting, The SCRD was looking at approximately 134 carry forward projects, and those are various projects that have been approved in prior years that are anticipated to move forward into the next financial plan. It is anticipated that a few of these will come off, and we will update this particular list right up until our budget adoption. And we had 82 new projects coming forward for consideration for the 2022 budget. So again, from a summary perspective, the preliminary funding sources were in the neighborhood of $1.7 million of taxation, all the way down to almost $3 million of reserves, and to almost $3 million of tax and other grants and service user fees. So at our November 1st committee, our community partners and stakeholders, so those are our Public Library Association, our museums, our chambers, community schools, those particular groups did not present at pre-budget as they typically did. The board made a change in acknowledgement to their capacity and constraints to prepare these type of packages, and they'll be presenting to the board at the round 1 budget deliberations on December 13th. So we'll learn a little bit more about what kind of requests they may have coming for us. So our preliminary tax and parcel tax is an area. We did provide a little bit of information in regards to those for this year. And really the focus is on what the high level change might be for each electoral area. And some more information will be coming to this Thursday's Corporate and Administrative Services Committee meeting as far as what some of those factors might look like coming into pre-budget or into budget. So these are really based on existing approvals and contractual obligations coming into the budget. And we provided various scenarios as to if different types of packages, so those 82 proposals, if they were approved, what that might look like from a property taxation perspective. So again, these are all subject to change, again, based on revenue sources and whether or not they're going to be approved coming into the 2022 budget. So again, we do not receive our property assessment information from BC Assessment. And again, these do impact some taxation rates dependent on how property values increase or decrease. Most likely going to increase because that's really the indication on the Sunshine Coast, and everybody has seen that in the property values. So again, we'll get that information as part of round 2. Just trying to get the next slide here. Sorry, it's wanting to go too far. So some of the what if scenarios that we provided at the pre-budget deliberations was the various what if scenarios. So our baseline status quo provided as to whether or not no budget proposals or new initiatives were approved. We were looking at a 0.01% increase. And so if some of the question is why we are seeing such a reduced rate over any prior year is really because a lot of the one-time projects that were funded in 2021 are coming off here. So those particular funding are already committed, and so they're not brought into the next budget cycle. So we also have different classifications of proposals for the board's consideration, and our mandatory initiatives are those that have imminent asset failure. So we have a roof that's leaking and needs imminent repair. We might have items that are of regulatory compliance. So especially in our solid waste division, we have various regulations from our Ministry of Environment that requires us to do certain types of things that are landfill, and really we are obligated. So there's really not a lot of decisions to be made associated with that. And then we have things related to safety. So they might mean that there's an imminent risk to the community or to our staff members. And so We want to make sure that everyone remains safe. I think it's very important to note that, of course, those types of things, if they're emergent, we would deal with them right away, and or compliance type of issues like WCB regulations that require us to shift how we operate in our various services. Business continuity means if we want to maintain existing service levels. So that might mean we have several cost pressures in some of the items that we deliver. And so we have to make some increases into those. So those are service level decisions. Do we want to continue to deliver the same types of service that we provide? So an example of that would be, do we still want to provide the same level of service from a transit perspective? Strategic. Those are related to items that directly move the board's strategic plan forward. And those are key strategic initiatives that bring those proposals forward. And we've got low cost, high value. And so those are things that are relatively inexpensive. So maybe, $5,000 or $10,000, but have a lot of value to either the community from a customer service perspective or from some efficiencies in delivering the services. And the other are really items that may be community requests. They really don't fit some of those other criteria. And again, we have our community partners and stakeholders that are blank because we're yet to decide or see what their proposals are coming forward. So again, at the end of our preliminary budget discussion, we were estimating if every proposal, those 82 proposals, were brought forward and approved, we'd be looking at a property taxation of upwards of 7.26%. So our water rates were presented this past Thursday, and these are still to be approved, but the preliminary user rate for our regional water service was estimated at $526, so about a $58 difference, and our parcel tax was $305. So that meant that about $73 was going to be the difference over the prior year. Our North Pender water service saw an increase overall of about $100. And so their user rates went up about $86 and parcel tax $14. And for South Pender, we're looking at just under $100, about $96 overall for both their user rate and parcel tax. So what's been considered in these rate analysis and the parcel tax is user rate do cover the operations of these various utilities. And so in the past, we've had some disalignment with our user rates being funded or our operations being funded through our parcel taxes. So again, that's why some of these user rates are looking to be a little bit higher. So we're balancing those off finally for 2022. And so our parcel tax covers capital or capital improvements in the service. And again, more detail can be found as far as the user rates. Very detailed reports were provided if anyone wants some further information. So for our solid waste and for refuse collection in particular, and so this particular services are rural areas, excluding Area A. And for 2021, we provided a 3-year rate structure. And as part of our pre-budget review, we realized that for 2022, we didn't want our staff came forward with recommending that we not increase our refuse collection waste for 2022. That was proposed to be increased by about 5%. So it's going to be status quo to 2021. So it was 191 in 2021, and it's going to remain at 191 in 2022. I think this is partially in acknowledgement to some service interruptions that have happened in the community. And of note, we have yet to receive any refunds from the contractor, but staff still are working with them as far as ensuring that we have sustainable service delivery for our refuse collection in our rural areas. So for 2023, it was proposed that the rate would increase again by another 3.5%. But again, that will be just deferred, and we'll do the 5% proposed for that particular year for refuse collection. So a little bit of a break for users there. So as far as our wastewater services, the regional district has over 15 various wastewater or sewage plants that they operate in the various local service areas throughout the regional district. And so those particular user rates were also discussed at last week's committee. And so depending on what area it was, I'm not going to go through each of these various items. We had various rates approved. Of note here, Area B had elected to not make any increases, so they've been omitted from some of, well, actually, thank you, Aidan, for including those, but they were omitted. So if you do take a look at the minutes, you'll notice that those are not included for amendment coming forward. So the same for the frontage fees. Those rates did come forward for amendment and making some small adjustments to various services where some of the Area B ones were not amended. So again, these particular rates are going to come forward for approval, and the bylaws are scheduled to be adopted on December the 9th. The reason these need to be done is so we're in compliance and can charge the rates in time for 2022. So next steps for consideration, continuing the community conversation. So again, we're doing our community sessions here in preparation of our round 1 budget deliberations to talk about what the budget is looking like coming forward. We have several reports that continue to come forward as part of our committees. So again, November 18th, we have one again here coming on in November. So all to say that we have a lot of information still flowing through the committee on our various budget related items. And so our round 1 budget takes place on December 13th, 14th, and 15th. And we're going to be having some area specific information sessions for our member municipalities as well as our rural areas scheduled in January. So stay tuned for those dates, more information. And our round 2 budget will take place on the week of January 24th with our financial plan bylaw scheduled to be adopted in February. So from there, I will stop sharing my screen and pass it over to you.
Thanks, Tina. Just a little breaker tradition here. I'm just going to ask a couple of questions here before I start my presentation. We've one that came in, and then we've another one which would be kind of directly pertaining to what we've just been speaking about, and also gives Director Toth a chance to answer a couple of questions if he wants before he heads out. So the question that came in was looking at the large increase in technology used for hybrid meetings. Is there a request in the budget for additional IT staff?
I can take, yeah,
go for it. Thanks, Tina.
I can take that one. So in 2021, as part of our COVID restart funds, staff did come forward for some additional resources for IT. And so during 2021, we did some active recruitment, and some of our resources just came online this past September. So for 2022, there's not an additional request. We're just trying to see what it looks like to have this additional resource and have them online. So again, if I could look in a crystal ball, if we're going to ask for more IT requests, it would likely be in 2023, but not for 2022 budget.
Perfect, thank you, Tina. And I got one more just before I'll kickstart my presentation, and maybe I'll put this to the director, so whoever would like to take it. We're looking, Tina touched on the number of projects in the presentation. And the question's asking, why are so many projects being moved forward? I believe it's 82, when there's still projects left to be completed from previous years. So I think the carry forward this year is 134 projects. So I'm not too sure who'd like to take that. Feel free to jump on in.
Well, I can start, and most certainly I can, if anyone else wants to jump in, by all means. So a lot of those 134 are items that do look to be completed soon, but some of them acknowledge that they're multi-year projects. So I'm going to use some, let's just take one of the most high priority and high profile projects being Church Road. And that one most certainly has multiple steps in it. So it requires us to carry those forward. We do have some that are smaller in scale and will drop off most certainly in maybe even the coming months before December 31st. So hopefully we'll see that number dwindle. And then the 82 new projects sometimes are a continuation of some of those projects already in there. So whether it's the Langdale water treatment plant, wastewater treatment plant, the Langdale well, so the ongoing groundwater investigation. So they really are a continuation of various other projects in there. And some of them just are required based on, like I said, regulatory compliance. We had several dozen of those 82 projects that were in those categories.
Yeah, go ahead, Director Toth, and then Director McMahon.
Thanks. I just wanted to add in that, some of those projects, they're one-time projects, as regulatory compliance. We've got dam safety upgrades that have to be done on pretty much all of the SCRD's dams. I believe one of the items that's in there is relating to running the 2022 general election. It's not like we can just say no to having the election. So there's a lot of, one-time short time projects that are on that list as well.
Director McMahon?
Yeah, I was just going to comment that we're moving our budget process forward or backward, depending on which way you want to look at it. We have to have our budget passed by March the 31st, but we're trying to do it earlier. And one of the reasons for that is to get a jump start on the new year, because otherwise, if we don't pass the budget until March the 31st, we can't even start tendering projects until April. And that means that almost half the year is gone before things get underway. So we're trying to be a little more timely, and it's much appreciated that staff are stepping up to this, because moving the deadlines forward is not easy for anybody.
Perfect, thank you. I'll get to a couple more questions now in a minute. I'm just going to share my screen and just give a quick 5-minute presentation, which is going to speak to the budget survey that we've done recently here. So I'll just get this going here and play. Okay, does everybody see my screen okay? And it's bright, as you can see. So this is just going to be a quick overview of our Budget 22 community check-in, which ran through October and November on our Let's Talk platform. So first and foremost, why do a survey? And I really want to point out that, this survey is very, very high level. And this is really a start to us asking more probing questions on some of the issues and services along the Sunshine Coast. So, what we wanted to learn from this survey was, first off, what services are important to residents. And secondly, where residents feel tax dollars are best spent. We wanted to gauge the level of interest in the SCRD's budget process and also identify any barriers that may exist for some folks who want to learn some more. And then finally, from a communication standpoint, we really wanted to drill down and find out where residents are getting their information from, so that we can really streamline our process in getting our information out more effectively. And so the budget itself, the survey itself, we received a total of 583 responses. 49 of those were on paper, and 534 were online via our engagement platform. The paper surveys were made available at libraries in Gibsons and Seashelt, and also at recreation facilities in Pender Harbour, Seashelt, and Gibsons as well as our office at Field Road. So when we take a look and see where most of our responses came from, first off was Seashelt, followed by Roberts Creek, and followed by Elphinstone. But as you can see, we had a pretty good representation right around the coast. We did find that we saw most paper copies coming in through Pender Harbour and the Aquatic Centre there. I know the staff are doing a great job having folks fill them out. So the first two questions, or sorry, beg your pardon, the second two questions, then we were asking what services are most important to you, and how much investment do you think the SCRD should be providing to each of these services? And I should put in a little caveat here. There's a lot more information pertaining to each of these questions, and I'm not going to get in depth into each one. This is more of a kind of a high level overview, but there is a full report which includes over 600 comments that we received through the survey, which is all available both on the SCRD website and on our engagement platform too. So when we look at SCRD services, this is some of what we heard. Water and waste are top of mind. Emergency services and parks also ranked very, very high for services that were important to people. Some of the rankings, they do align with our strategic plan, particularly around asset stewardship, and that's when we take a look at water and waste. Then, people could also enter comments and mostly focused on improvements to water supply and sports fields, Dakota Ridge, both very, very popular topics. And I believe that was based off of community groups and, really getting a hold of this survey and pushing it out through their members, which is really great to see. And there were questions around, the issue of having infrastructure to support development. And then something that I'll get to a little bit later on in the presentation was roads. They were mentioned a number of times, and it did become clear as I read through some of what we were receiving from the presentation is that there still seems to be maybe a little bit of a lack of knowledge out in the community around what the SCRD is responsible for. And that's something that we're going to be taking forward from a communication standpoint and really working hard on communicating that out. Next up then, we're looking at budget participation and 3 questions here. How do you rate your knowledge of the SCRD's budget process? Have you ever taken part in a meeting about the SCRD's budget process? And then finally, if they answered no, asking them why. So what we overwhelmingly heard was that, most residents hadn't taken part in a meeting to do with our budget process. Many said they didn't appear to know when our meetings are taking place. And that's something that we've already started to try to remedy through some more promoted posts through social media, and also, putting more information into our local paper here on the Coast Reporter. A lot of people said they are interested, but they wanted some resources to help understand their budget. And some commented that they'd like to get the information in a more visual format. And that's something that we've already started doing. Our communications officer, Cecilia Garcia, has done a really great job on some videos that explain the budget process and that are all available again on our Let's Talk platform. So next up was communications. 2 questions. Where do you receive your information about the SCRD, and how can the SCRD provide better communication opportunities to share feedback? So what we heard here was, the top 3, Coast Reporter, SCRD website, and Facebook, all ranked very, very high, and with the Coast Reporter really coming out on top. There is widespread frustration with the website, and I'm very happy to say that will be remedied in the coming months as we get working on a new look and a new website, which will be more user-friendly and more service-oriented. So hopefully you won't have to click through 6 or 7 links to find the info that you want. And community Facebook groups, community group pages, very, very popular. We did have requests for, direct email and newsletters. And again, that's something that we will be actioning through our new website. And we are looking at having a newsletter function on there. And we do have a newsletter which currently goes out once a month, the Coast Current. And we may be looking at doing more frequent newsletters. Direct mail also came up, and that is a really good way for us to reach residents. It can be quite expensive, so we'd absolutely have to pick the right initiatives for us to be, direct mailing out, but we do already have existing direct mail as utility bill being one, and we will be looking to utilize that space to share information with residents. And many said the survey is a good start, and there was concern that we heard a little bit through the survey that the feedback that's being provided would not be actioned. So finally, was an open question, and we just asked if there's anything else that residents would like to share. And here we heard over 190 comments. Water, quite a substantial, big issue for residents. There's concern about a taxation increase this year. A number of comments about roads, ferries, and areas of development outside of the SCRD's control, and that kind of harps back to something I said earlier in just us really doing a better job of explaining what the SCRD is responsible for versus what we're not responsible for. And I think through the current emergency operations center that we have activated, we've really worked very well with stakeholders to share information on some of their behalf, such as the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure. And many comments were focused on service improvements and also service increase. There was very few comments from people who wanted to see any service decreases. So last slide then. So what's next? So, we got the community information sessions with our first one last week, last Tuesday, and we have tonight's session as well. The recordings of these are on YouTube. Our Let's Talk budget page at letstalk.scrd.ca/budget. And there's an opportunity to go on there and read lots about our budget and, watch a couple of videos that we've put together, which we're really trying to explain this process in as easy a way as possible. On there, you can provide feedback, and you can also ask questions, and the questions come directly through to myself and Tina, and we'll make sure we get an answer to you. And comments on communications, absolutely, we're already factoring them into our budget communications. And throughout the next couple of months, what you can expect to see from us are news releases and social media posts, really drilling down and trying to break down each round of budget in a way that's understandable. And finally, which I touched on earlier, is just some visual storytelling on the SCRD's budget process. So again, if you want to do a deeper dive, and as I said, there's about 600 comments there that you're more than welcome to have a read through, all available on our engagement platform. So I'm just going to stop sharing my screen here, and okay. So I'm just going to follow on from the survey and the Let's Talk page, because that is where we had a question come in, and it's a two-part question. And I think I mentioned earlier, Director McMahon, I think this is somebody who may have taken your course on regional districts. So, they say, first of all, thank you for surveying citizens in 2022 priorities and posting the results. Our budget priorities are very clear. However, if the SCRD is restricted in its ability to adjust the budget accordingly, this could cause frustration. So there's two questions here. The first one is asking, they say, we hear that the current SCRD budget structure is inflexible and not very transparent. How will you get around this in the 2022 budgeting exercise to ensure that the allocation of limited resources reflects our clear 22 priorities and citizens are able to track that our money has been spent this way? So I'll leave that open to whoever wants to take it first. Okay, Director McMahon.
You kind of pitched that at me. I heard it coming. The regional districts have budget silos, so we can't move money around. If we have extra money left over in parks, we cannot move it to water, as an example. That means that we have to be very, very cautious and careful about how we budget. And most of the time, I think staff does an excellent job, but sometimes there's wild cards. Things happen that you can't possibly predict. We've had some problems with our landfill, which we didn't see coming. Nobody saw COVID coming. Lots of things can happen. And, there's really very little we can do about that except complain to the province, who don't seem to care very much. Transparency is a much bigger question. Some budget items we have a lot of detail on, and others we don't. And that's challenging. I think it's a work in progress. At that point, I would kind of pass it over to somebody else. I think that the budget process is slowly improving every year. And I think we always come out of the budget looking for ways to do it better next year.
Anybody else like to add to that, or I can move on to the next one? Director,
come on, Len. Come on, Len.
It's a tough question. The question always is how much information do you provide to the directors and about any one subject? I always would like to see the information available online if a person is curious. And so when you see a high level budget item, it would be nice to be able to, if you happen to get quite curious about that one issue, to be able to drill down into all the details. Every time I've asked, all the details have been there. So I do know they're there. So it's all a question of how the information I believe it's a question of how the information is presented. And I have big hopes for the new website. So I think that will help.
Mhm. And I'll just add to tag on to what Director McMahon was saying about the very siloed nature of regional districts. And having been in the school district area for 10 years, and also watching municipal budgeting and provincial and federal budgeting processes go down, it is regional district budgeting is very challenging, because it is, if there's a deficit in one area, then it's a deficit. We can't budget, and we can't budget for that by provincial legislation. We have to have balanced budgets. So it makes things really tough. It's because we need to have reserves built up operationally and for capital expenditures. But at the same time, we cannot take from water to look after landfill. And if there's an issue that's happening in landfill, as we've seen over the last couple of years, that's increasing taxes across the coast for all jurisdictions.
Director Lee, did you want to add there? See if your hand up.
Yes, actually, I wanted to speak in favor of the silos that we make. I very much appreciate that we collect the money for something we say we're going to collect it for instance, solid waste, or if it's recycling or whatever we're doing it for, water. But then we spend it on it. And I've long been opposed to the senior government's habit of saying that they're going to put a tax on gas and spend it on roads, or a gas on marine gas and then put it into general revenue. So I think that local government taxation is probably the most transparent of any of the orders of government that tax. So it's cumbersome, but it sure is easy to understand where your money's going.
Perfect. Thank you. And the second part of the question, you touched on it earlier, Director McMahon, was they're asking for future budget exercises. Are you talking with the province about changing the budget structure for regional districts? And they're asking for a timeline as well, which is something I presume we don't have.
Well, we are not having that conversation at the moment. It's an interesting one. I think we could, while I appreciate what Len said about accountability, I think there is a balance between that level of accountability and building some flexibility, and especially in emergencies, as we've seen in the last year or two. So I don't believe that particular item is under discussion at this time, but good question. And incidentally, if anybody wants to buy us some drinks, we could probably talk about this all night.
Perfect. Thank you. And we had a question which came in from Rotary Club of Pender Harbour. And I think I might put this one over to you, Director Lee. They're asking about some solid waste removal. And they're asking, I hope I'm pronouncing it right, what would it cost to have solid waste removal in all or some parts of Area A? Would it be $200 approximately, like other areas?
I'm actually not the right one to answer that question, because I'm not aware of what we are currently charging. It would be very similar to what Area B is paying, though, for pickup. It's kind of it needs to be put into proper context, because I believe garbage is picked up one week and recycling the next. So I don't. Does either Donna or Lori know what the monthly rate is for that stuff?
$191.
There's the answer.
So
that's the annual. So it's about $200 a year. And And yeah, I mean, that's not a bad deal. That's what, $4 a week?
Yeah, I believe that if Area A was to join into that service, though, we kind of throw a monkey wrench into it because of the large distances between the properties up here. We're not really densely populated like our southern areas. There's huge distances. I think even if you look at Area B, they're fairly concentrated along the lower road there as well. So, but Area A, man, we're scattered. Francis Peninsula down to Saginaw and over to Egmont. It's hard to imagine what the cost actually would be. But let's just say 200.
So I'm just going through a chat here in Rotary Club of Pender Harbour Stas and some other questions. So why don't we implement? I think that's the one you just touched on there, Director Lee. And I'm just trying to, I think they're asking about, why don't we try 2 different routes? Maybe Francis Peninsula and Garden Bay. So would that be potentially on the cards?
That's probably what you would do. We do have a private pickup here that's quite affordable. And it would be hard to imagine. Well, yeah, if it was mandated on the taxes, I guess it would be more cost effective, because right now he's probably picking up every 3rd house or something like that, opposed to every house. So I'm not sure how you'd go ahead with that. But I guess we'd have to make a petition, and Tina could probably tell me, but.
Yeah, it would require, there's various ways legislatively we'd have to enact that. So you wouldn't be able to just amend that service, because right now the service participants are limited. So to include a different service area would require several legislative steps, including public consultation. And so, or there's other alternatives as well, just creating its own local service area, which requires, again, public consultation and establishment of service. It is a little bit of a long process because of that public consultation, and depending on staff's capacity, we need provincial approval, etc. It's not something that we can implement overnight. So, yeah.
But it is possible if the majority of the people want to do it, I guess, is really the bottom line of it. And it would be up to the citizens to initiate that through a petition, I believe.
Perfect. Thank you. So this is our last question that I have here. But if any of our attendees would like to ask a question, you can do so in the Q&A down the bottom, or else feel free to put your question in the chat. And I can absolutely ask it on your behalf. So the question which was asked, and we covered this off a little bit last week, it's speaking to some of our aging infrastructure. We touched earlier, I believe Director Top did, on our dams in the province, and it's asking whether or not we'll see any investment from the province in some of this aging infrastructure. And I'm not too sure who would like to take that one on.
Well, we definitely look, I can start with that. And so we definitely have had a lot of great success with receiving grants for various capital infrastructure projects. What the province doesn't provide a lot of fund is capital renewal funding. So if you, there definitely is a responsibility to the local governments to ensure that we maintain our infrastructure at a certain standard. So essentially that's why there's a very large movement associated with having asset management plans to ensure that we have efficient and effective sustainable funding for our services from a preventative maintenance side of it. But a good example of potential grants that we've applied for and are hoping to be successful is for our Wood Creek wastewater plant. And that particular grant, I think, was a little over $700,000. And that was very important funding for a very small local service area. So we continue to canvass grant opportunities to see how they can align. Most certainly, a lot of the grant funding now is focused on reducing impacts to climate change. And so essentially we're looking a lot through those particular grant opportunities for greening infrastructure and whatnot. So that seems to be the focus now, and we'll continue to look at that. So I guess the wholehearted is yes.
Director Pratt, did you want to add? I just saw you kind of.
No, I had something else
Okay.
flit across my screen, as these notifications often do, and you have to get rid of them. Sorry.
Sorry.
No, I would fully agree with what our CFO said. You know, we have a lot that we're looking at, and the provincial granting programs and federal granting programs are going to really be able to help us. And we have thousands and thousands of kilometers of pipes and other levels of infrastructure within the regional district, and it's a lot to maintain that. But it's mind-boggling as we've started this this process of looking at asset stewardship and going, okay, there's a lot that needs to be done, and a lot that the community needs to come along with us on, because we have a significant amount of investment that we need to do going forward.
I'd like to add a little bit with my experience in Area A. We have been fortunate to have some grants. We had a grant that helped with replacing some water mains on both Francis Peninsula and in Garden Bay. And this year, we've actually decided to use some federal gas tax money to help with the water. Which is actually directly keeping the taxes down. So we do get some grants, and I'll tell you, they're very much appreciated. We had some for wastewater plants as well last year, and we had a grant for planning. You get quite a lot of grants for doing planning for infrastructure work, which you'd have to pay for yourself anyways. So it all helps. So. Bring them on. We need more.
Perfect. Thank you. We've just had a question in from Rotary Club of Pender Harbour again, asking, does the SCRD have sufficient staff to do all the groundwork required to complete projects on the books? And how do these staff numbers impact new projects? Good question. Okay, who wants to go first, Director Lee or Director McMahon? Do you want to go first, since Director Lee is just speaking? Then we can bring you in, Director Lee.
Okay, I'll take a swing at this. That's kind of a yes and a no. One of the challenges that every government on the coast is having right now is hiring. It's a highly competitive market across the country for a lot of specialties like planners and water technicians. And so we are up against every other municipality that needs this kind of staff. And our housing prices are much higher than most places in Canada. So it's really difficult. We are constantly hiring. You can go on our website and see or look at the ads in the paper. So we are budgeting to hire the staff that we're going to need, and we're keeping our fingers crossed that we're going to be able to get them.
Director Lee?
I was very much going to speak along the vein that Director McMahon just did. It's I would like to think we have sufficient headcount. You really won't know that until the process changes that have been forced by COVID settle down and we get efficiency from the remote working. And we can fill the vacancies. Our person in HR has been telling us that they posted 2-3 times before they can actually are successful in finding a good candidate. So it takes a long time. I believe we have 2020 vacancies that we're still working on, and we're talking about 2022. And you get some things that are inevitable. I was looking at some of the budget proposals for new staff, and it's for things like we're getting so many frequent or freedom of information requests that we have to answer, but we don't have the staff because that's something that we've never ever planned for. And so we put the head count in there. Now we got to try and hire. But those things, it's a changing world, and yeah, we're trying, and we are definitely gaining, but we're not there yet.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, perhaps we do not often highlight improvements that happen. I was much impressed by the fact that staff have sorted out Chapman Lake so that they don't have to fly when we're deploying the siphon. It used to be that we had to fly somebody in by helicopter every day to check the functioning of the siphon, and they've now got all the remote monitoring equipment up there so that they can do it on the phone. And that's brilliant. It saves time, it saves money, and it's a much more efficient way of doing things. And there's been quite a few process improvements that way, and we should, we should celebrate them.
I might add that we had staff who were hiking up to Chapman as well through the summer, as well to check regularly on the siphons. So there's no more questions. So I'm going to give it another 30 seconds. If anybody would like to ask a question, please feel free to do so. Just while I'm waiting, I'll just let you know again that you can watch this session back on the SCRD's YouTube channel. You can also check out our budget engagement site at letstalk.scrd.ca/budget, and we'll be posting this session, and you can see some of the questions that have been answered on there too. In addition to that, we've got lots more information like the SCRD strategic plan, and as I mentioned earlier, a couple of videos as well, which are aiming to help inform the process a little better. So I want to thank everyone for taking part this evening. Stay tuned. We're going to have more sessions like this one, area specific sessions through January, and we hope to see everyone there. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you.